The microwave hummed its familiar tune at 2 in the morning, heating leftover pizza, while I stood in my kitchen wearing nothing but boxers and the kind of exhaustion that comes from pretending everything's fine. My name is Cole Solen, and I used to believe in happy endings. Used to think that hard work, loyalty, and love could build something lasting. Turns out, I was just another fool with a hammer, trying to fix something that was already broken beyond repair. Vera's phone sat on the granite counter like a loaded weapon, its screen lighting up every few minutes with notifications. My wife of 8 years had returned from her book club an hour ago, stumbling through the front door with wine on her breath and lipstick that wasn't quite the same shade she'd left wearing. She'd mumbled something about discussing contemporary fiction before collapsing on the living room couch, still fully dressed. The pizza finished heating with a cheerful ding. I pulled it out, the cheese bubbling and perfect, unlike everything else in my life. That's when I noticed her laptop was still open on the kitchen island, the screensaver cycling through family photos that now felt like evidence of a crime I hadn't yet discovered. Contemporary fiction, I muttered, taking a bite of pizza that tasted like cardboard. Right. Vera's phone buzzed again. The notification preview showed just enough to make my stomach drop. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place, same time. Delete this. I set down my pizza and stared at the phone. 8 years of marriage. 2 kids sleeping upstairs. A Victorian house we'd restored together, board by board, dream by dream. And here I was, standing in my own kitchen at 2 in the morning, finally understanding why my wife had been so distant, so critical, so eager to find fault with everything I did. The smart move would have been to walk away, go to bed, pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I've never been accused of being smart. I've been called reliable, hardworking, loyal to a fault, but never smart. I picked up her phone. The screen was locked, but I knew Vera's patterns. She used the same 4-digit code for everything. Our anniversary. October 15th, 10:15. The phone unlocked with a soft click that sounded like a door closing on my old life. The text messages told a story I wasn't prepared to read. Months of conversations with someone named Marcus Hallen. I knew that name. Regional VP at Vera's fintech company. Married guy with kids of his own. The messages started professional enough, but by March they'd turned into something else entirely. Book club was torture tonight. Couldn't stop thinking about last weekend. Your husband doesn't deserve you. When are you going to tell him? The kids will understand eventually. We deserve to be happy. I scrolled deeper, my hands surprisingly steady. Hotel confirmations, flight itineraries, photos I definitely wasn't supposed to see. A whole secret life mapped out in blue and gray text bubbles, complete with plans for their future and casual discussions about getting rid of the old man. That would be me. The old man. At 34. I set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. The kitchen felt different now, smaller somehow. The family photos on the refrigerator looked like props in a play I'd been unknowingly performing in. The kids' artwork, the grocery lists in Vera's neat handwriting, the calendar marking soccer games and school events. All of it suddenly felt like set decoration for a lie. Vera stirred on the couch, mumbling something in her sleep. I walked over and looked down at her. Even unconscious, she looked put together. Perfect blonde hair, expensive skincare routine, designer clothes that cost more than I used to make in a week, back when I was swinging hammers for a living. She'd married a carpenter and slowly molded him into something more acceptable. A project manager, a homeowner, a father who wore khakis to parent-teacher conferences. But apparently, that still wasn't enough. I returned to the kitchen and opened her laptop. No password protection. Vera had always been careless about security. Her email told the same story as her phone, but with more details. Hotel receipts going back 6 months, airline confirmations, even a shared calendar with Marcus, color-coded and organized like a business project, which I suppose it was. The business of dismantling my life. The most recent email was from her lawyer cousin, Eli Morrison. Subject line, custody strategy. I clicked it open and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something more focused than that. Vera, as discussed, we need to establish a pattern of Cole being an unfit father. Document everything. Photos of him missing family events, evidence of neglect, anything that shows you as the primary caregiver. The courts favor mothers, but we need ammunition. Start building the case now. I closed the laptop and walked back to my pizza, which had gone cold while I'd been getting educated about my wife's exit strategy. She wasn't just having an affair, she was planning a complete takeover. My house, my kids, my life, all of it was apparently up for grabs. But here's the thing about being a carpenter turned project manager. You learn to think systematically. You learn that every structure has weak points, and every problem has a solution if you're willing to do the work. You learn patience, planning, and precision. And sometimes, you learn that the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even. I finished my cold pizza and started making plans. If Vera wanted to play chess with my life, she was about to discover that she'd been underestimating her opponent. I might not have her education or her connections, but I had something she'd apparently forgotten about. I knew how to build things, and I knew how to tear them down. The next morning arrived with the kind of false normalcy that makes you question your own sanity. Vera bustled around the kitchen in her silk robe, making coffee and scrolling through her phone like she hadn't spent the previous evening planning my destruction. The kids, Emma, 12, and Jake, 9, sat at the breakfast bar eating cereal and arguing about whose turn it was to feed the dog. "Morning, honey," Vera said without looking up from her phone. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I replied, which was true enough. I'd spent the rest of the night making lists and thinking through contingencies. "Big project at work today." She nodded absently, already lost in whatever conversation was more important than her family. Probably Marcus, planning their next book club meeting. I made breakfast for the kids, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, while Vera continued her digital conversation. This was our routine, had been for months. I handled the morning logistics while she managed her secret life. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Dad, can you drive me to soccer practice after school?" Emma asked. Mom said she might be working late. "Of course, sweetheart." I glanced at Vera, who was typing furiously. "Working late again?" "Team building exercise," she said without missing a beat. "New employee integration. Could run until 9 or 10. I nodded and made a mental note. Team building. That was a new euphemism. After the kids left for school and Vera departed for her job, I called in sick to work and drove to meet Cal Henderson, my oldest friend and the closest thing I had to a technical expert. Cal ran IT for a small accounting firm downtown, which meant he knew his way around computers and had a flexible schedule. We met at Murphy's, the riverfront bar that served as an unofficial office for half the blue-collar workers in town. Mick Murphy, the owner, had been a friend since high school, the kind of guy who knew everyone's business and could keep his mouth shut when it mattered. "You look terrible," Cal observed as I slid into the booth across from him. He was thin and pale, with the kind of nervous energy that came from too much caffeine and too many late nights staring at screens. "Thanks for the pep talk. I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" I pulled out a burner phone I'd bought on the way over. The kind that requires plausible deniability. Cal's eyebrows went up. "This about Vera? What makes you say that? Because you've been looking like someone kicked your dog for the past 3 months, and you just bought a burner phone. Doesn't take a genius to connect the dots." I told him everything. The texts, the emails, the custody strategy. Cal listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head or muttering under his breath. When I finished, he leaned back and whistled low. "Marcus Hallen. I know that guy. His company uses our accounting firm. Real piece of work. Treats everyone like they're beneath him. Can you help me?" Cal was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. What you're talking about isn't exactly legal. I'm not asking you to hack anything. I just need to know what she's really up to. Phone records, travel patterns, financial transactions, all stuff that'll come out in divorce proceedings anyway. And if I say no, then I figure it out myself and probably mess it up. Cal sighed. Give me her phone for 5 minutes. I can clone it, mirror everything to a secure server. You'll see every text, every call, every app notification in real time. How? Better you don't know the technical details. Just know that it's not technically hacking if I'm creating a backup for legitimate security purposes. I handed him Vera's phone. She'd left it charging on the kitchen counter, another sign of how comfortable she'd become with her deception. Cal plugged it into a device that looked like a regular charging cable and started typing on his laptop. This'll take about 3 minutes, he said. Tell me about the custody thing. She's documenting everything, building a case that I'm an unfit father. Are you? The question hit harder than I'd expected. I don't think so. I mean, I work long hours sometimes, but I'm there for the important stuff. School plays, soccer games, bedtime stories. I thought I was doing okay. You're a good father, Cole. Everyone knows that. But courts can be unpredictable, especially if she's got a lawyer who knows how to spin things. Cal's laptop beeped. Done. From now on, everything that happens on her phone gets copied to a secure server. You'll have access to all of it. What about Marcus? That's trickier. I can't just walk up and ask to borrow his phone, but I might be able to get his company email if you can create a distraction. What kind of distraction? Cal grinned. The kind that requires plausible deniability. We spent the next hour planning what Cal called Operation Transparency. It wasn't elegant, but it was thorough. By the time we finished, I had a clear picture of how to gather the evidence I needed and a timeline for putting everything together. The first step was talking to Elena Torvin, our former nanny. Elena had worked for us for 4 years before Vera suddenly decided we didn't need help anymore. The official reason was budget constraints, but I'd always suspected there was more to it. Elena had been around for too much, seen too much, knew too much about our family dynamics. I found Elena at the coffee shop where she worked part-time while finishing her nursing degree. She was surprised to see me but agreed to talk during her break. We sat outside on the patio, where the noise from traffic would cover our conversation. I wondered when you'd figure it out, she said after I explained why I was there. You knew? About the affair? I suspected? About the travel? I knew for sure. I kept detailed records of my hours, Cole. Every time Vera claimed to be home with the kids, I was the one actually watching them. She was gone 37 times in the past year. Overnight trips, weekend getaways, sudden business emergencies. I documented everything. Why didn't you say anything? Elena stirred her coffee slowly. Because she made me sign a non-disclosure agreement when she fired me. Said it was standard procedure, but I knew it was to keep me quiet about what I'd seen. What did you see? Phone calls at all hours. Designer clothes showing up that she'd hide from you. Credit card statements she'd intercept before you could see them. And the way she talked about you when she thought I wasn't listening. What did she say? That you were holding her back. That she deserved better. That the kids would be fine with just her once she made some changes. Elena leaned forward. She's not the woman you married, Cole. I don't know if she ever was. I felt something settle in my chest. A kind of grim satisfaction. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was just finally seeing clearly. Would you be willing to testify about the travel records? If it means those kids stay with their father? Absolutely. But Cole, be careful. Vera's not going to go down easy, and she's got resources you don't. I thanked Elena and drove home, my head spinning with new information and possibilities. Vera's car was in the driveway, which meant her team-building exercise had ended early, or been postponed, or never existed in the first place. I found her in the kitchen, still in her work clothes, typing on her laptop. She looked up when I walked in, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there that morning. Suspicion. How was work? She asked. Productive? Got a lot done? How was team building? Fine. We finished earlier than expected. She closed her laptop. Cole, we need to talk. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. About what? About us. About where we're going. About what's best for the kids. I sat down across from her, noting how she'd positioned herself between me and her laptop. I'm listening. I think we both know this isn't working anymore. We've grown apart. We want different things. Maybe it's time to admit that and figure out how to move forward. Move forward how? Separation, divorce, whatever you want to call it. But we need to think about Emma and Jake. They need stability, consistency. They need to stay in their home, in their schools, with their primary caregiver. Their primary caregiver? Me, Cole. I've been handling their day-to-day care for years. You work long hours, you travel for projects. You're not always available when they need you. I stared at her, this woman I'd loved and trusted and built a life with, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Someone who could sit in our kitchen, surrounded by evidence of our shared life, and calmly explain why she deserved to keep everything while I got nothing. You've really thought this through, I said. We both have to be realistic about what's best for everyone involved. And what about what's best for me? For the first time, her composure cracked slightly. Cole, you'll be fine. You're resilient. You'll land on your feet. But the kids need their mother. I nodded slowly, as if I were actually considering her proposal. You're right. We should definitely think about what's best for the kids. Relief flickered across her face. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Oh, I'm being very reasonable. In fact, I think we should let the courts decide what's really best for Emma and Jake. You know, get an objective opinion. The relief vanished. Cole, because I've been thinking too, Vera, and I think those kids deserve a parent who's actually present, someone who puts them first, someone who doesn't disappear for mysterious business trips and team-building exercises. She stood up abruptly, grabbing her laptop. I think this conversation is over. Actually, I think it's just getting started. She paused at the kitchen doorway, and when she turned back, the mask had completely slipped. The woman looking at me wasn't the devoted mother and wife she pretended to be. This was someone calculating, cold, and very, very angry. Be careful, Cole. You don't want to make this ugly. I smiled. Too late for that, don't you think? After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not for reconciliation or happy endings, but for something better. Justice. Truth. The satisfaction of watching someone who'd underestimated me discover exactly how wrong they'd been. Vera wanted to play chess with my life. Fine. But she'd just made her first major mistake. She'd shown me her strategy before the game was over. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a law office that smelled like leather and disappointment, reading a petition that painted me as everything short of a monster. Unfit father, emotionally absent, unfit home environment. 11 pages of carefully crafted character assassination signed by Vera Solen and her lawyer cousin, Eli Morrison. My attorney, Janet Reeves, sat across from me reviewing the same document. Janet was in her 50s, with gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from 30 years of family law. Mick had recommended her, calling her the best divorce attorney in 3 counties and meaner than a junkyard dog when she needs to be. This is comprehensive, Janet said, which wasn't exactly reassuring. They've been building this case for months. Character witnesses, therapist evaluations, documented instances of your absence from family events. Most of those absences were work-related. I'm a project manager. Sometimes I have to travel to job sites. I understand that, but they're painting a picture of a father who prioritizes career over children. Look at this. She flipped to page 7. Photos from Emma's school play, Jake's soccer championship, the spring carnival. In every single one, Vera is present, and you're not. I studied the photos. She was right. Vera stood smiling next to our kids while I was presumably somewhere else, doing something that had seemed important at the time but now looked like neglect. The thing is, I said slowly, I remember being at most of those events. I might have stepped away to take a work call, or gone to get snacks or used the bathroom. But I was there. Can you prove it? I kept the programs, parking receipts. I always signed in at school events. They require it for security. Janet's expression brightened slightly. That's good. We can subpoena those records. What else? I pulled out a folder I'd been preparing for 3 weeks. Elena Torvin's employment records. She was our nanny for 4 years. Her timesheets show exactly when Vera was and wasn't home. Also, hotel receipts, airline confirmations, and credit card statements showing Vera's travel patterns. How did you get these? Legitimate discovery, bank statements, credit reports, employment records, all stuff we're entitled to in divorce proceedings. Janet flipped through the documents, her expression growing more interested with each page. This is good work, Cole. Very thorough. But we need to be strategic about how we present it. If we come out swinging too hard, it looks vindictive. What do you recommend? We let them make their case first. Let Vera testify about what a devoted mother she is, how she's always been the primary caregiver. Then we ask some very specific questions about her travel schedule. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, I had to live with the knowledge that my wife was actively working to take my children away from me, while pretending everything was normal. Dinner conversations became surreal exercises in performance art, with both of us playing roles we'd perfected over months of deception. How was school today? Vera would ask the kids, the picture of maternal concern. Dad helped me with my math homework, Emma would say, and I'd catch Vera making a note on her phone, documenting my involvement, probably to counter it somehow. The surveillance went both ways. Cal's phone cloning operation was providing a steady stream of intelligence about Vera's real activities. Her late meetings were dinner dates with Marcus. Her business trips were romantic getaways. Her team-building exercises were exactly what you'd expect them to be. But the most damaging evidence came from her text conversations with Eli, her lawyer cousin. They discussed strategy openly, apparently confident that their communications were privileged. They were wrong. Need more evidence of Cole's absence from family activities, Eli texted. Can you create situations where he's forced to choose between work and kids? Already on it, Vera replied. Scheduled Emma's parent-teacher conference during his big presentation. He'll have to miss one or the other. Perfect. Document everything. Reading those messages felt like watching someone plan a robbery of my own house, but it also gave me crucial insight into their strategy. They were manufacturing evidence, creating scenarios designed to make me look bad, which meant I could prepare for them. The parent-teacher conference was a perfect example. Vera had scheduled it for the same day as my presentation to the city planning committee, a presentation that had been on the calendar for 6 months. The old me would have stressed about the conflict, probably would have sent Vera alone to the school meeting and then felt guilty about missing it. The new me rescheduled the presentation. I showed up at Emma's school 30 minutes early, signed in with the security desk, and had a productive conversation with her teacher about her progress in advanced mathematics. When Vera arrived, clearly expecting to find me absent, I was sitting in the hallway reviewing Emma's portfolio. You're here, she said, and I could practically see her recalculating. Of course I'm here. It's our daughter's conference. What about your presentation? Moved it to next week. Emma's education is more important than any work meeting. I watched her make another note on her phone and wondered what spin she'd put on this. Probably something about how I was being manipulative, changing my schedule to make her look bad. The conference went well. Emma was excelling in all her subjects, particularly math and science. Her teacher mentioned how engaged I'd been with her homework, how Emma often talked about the projects we worked on together. Vera sat quietly, occasionally asking questions, but mostly looking like she was attending a performance she hadn't expected. Afterward, in the parking lot, she finally spoke up. "That was nice of you to reschedule." "It wasn't nice. It was necessary. Emma's my daughter." "She's my daughter too, Cole." "Then maybe you should act like it instead of treating her like a pawn in whatever game you're playing." Her mask slipped again, just for a moment. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you don't." The pattern continued for weeks. Vera would create situations designed to make me choose between work and family, and I would consistently choose family. Soccer games, school events, doctor's appointments, I showed up for everything, documented everything, and watched her growing frustration as her strategy backfired. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Mrs. Durning, our elderly neighbor. Mrs. Durning was the unofficial neighborhood watch, a retired teacher who kept track of everyone's comings and goings with the dedication of a security professional. She knocked on my door on a Saturday morning while Vera was at her yoga class, which, according to the cloned phone, was actually brunch with Marcus. "Cole, dear, I hope you don't mind me saying, but I've been worried about you." "Worried how?" "Well, it's just that I've noticed Vera's been away quite a bit lately, and I know how hard it must be, managing everything on your own." Mrs. Durning had been keeping her own records, it turned out. Not intentionally, just out of habit. She'd noted every time Vera's car was gone overnight. Every morning she'd seen me walking the kids to the bus stop alone. Every evening I'd been in the backyard grilling dinner while Vera was mysteriously absent. "I have security cameras," she mentioned casually. "For insurance purposes, you understand? They cover my driveway, but they also capture a bit of your front yard. The insurance company requires 6 months of footage for claims purposes. 6 months of footage showing exactly when Vera was and wasn't home. 6 months of evidence that would corroborate Elena's timesheets and my own documentation. 6 months of proof that I'd been the primary caregiver while Vera was building her case about being the devoted mother. Mrs. Durning, would you be willing to share that footage with my attorney? If it would help those children, absolutely. They're lucky to have you, Cole. Not every father would be so dedicated." That evening, I sat in my kitchen reviewing everything we'd gathered: Elena's employment records, hotel receipts and travel confirmations, bank statements showing suspicious expenditures, text messages revealing the conspiracy to manufacture evidence, and now, security footage documenting the reality of our family life. Vera returned from her yoga class around 6, glowing with the kind of satisfaction that comes from a day well spent with someone who isn't your spouse. She found me at the kitchen table, papers spread out like I was working on a project. "What's all this?" she asked. "Just organizing some documents for the lawyers. You know how thorough they want everything to be." She moved closer, trying to see what I was reviewing, but I casually gathered the papers into a stack. "Cole, I've been thinking. Maybe we don't need to make this so adversarial. Maybe we can work something out privately, without putting the kids through a custody battle." "What kind of something?" "Joint custody. Shared time. You keep the house, I take the kids during the week, you get weekends and holidays. Everyone wins." I looked at her. This woman who'd spent months plotting to take my children away from me, now offering a compromise because she was starting to realize her strategy wasn't working. "That's generous of you," I said, "but I think I'll let the court decide what's best for Emma and Jake." "Cole, be reasonable. A custody fight is going to be expensive and ugly. It'll hurt the kids. You should have thought about that before you started documenting my every move and building a case to prove I'm an unfit father." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Just like you don't know about Marcus or the hotel receipts or the text messages with Eli about manufacturing evidence." For a long moment, we stared at each other across the kitchen table. Two people who'd once loved each other, now adversaries in a war she'd started, but was beginning to realize she might not win. You've been spying on me, she said finally. I've been protecting my children. There's a difference. She turned and walked away, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor we'd installed together 3 years ago. At the doorway, she paused. This isn't over, Cole. No, I agreed. It's not, but it's going to end very differently than you planned. After she left, I called Janet and scheduled a meeting for Monday morning. It was time to stop playing defense and start showing the court who the real primary caregiver had been all along. The custody war was about to begin in earnest, and I finally had the ammunition to win it. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and broken dreams. I sat next to Janet in the gallery, watching Vera take the witness stand in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She looked perfect, composed, maternal, every inch the devoted mother fighting for her children. Eli Morrison, her cousin and attorney, was equally polished. Expensive suit, confident demeanor, the kind of lawyer who specialized in making bad people look good and good people look questionable. He'd built his reputation on winning cases that should have been lost, and he approached Vera's testimony like a conductor leading a well-rehearsed orchestra. Mrs. Solen, can you describe your role in your children's daily care? I've been their primary caregiver since birth, Vera said, her voice steady and warm. I handle their morning routines, pack their lunches, coordinate their schedules, attend their school events, manage their medical care, help with homework, and put them to bed each night. And what about your husband's involvement? Cole works very demanding hours. He travels frequently for his job, often missing important family events. While he loves the children, his career has always been his priority. Eli walked her through a carefully constructed narrative supported by photos, calendars, and witness statements. Vera at school plays while I was absent. Vera at soccer games while I was traveling. Vera managing parent-teacher conferences, doctor's appointments, and birthday parties while I was presumably focused on work. It was masterfully done. By the time Eli finished, even I was starting to wonder if maybe I had been an absent father. The evidence seemed overwhelming, the pattern clear and consistent. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Patricia Hawkins was in her 60s, with silver hair and the kind of stern expression that suggested she'd seen every possible variation of human dysfunction. She'd been on the family court bench for 20 years, and her reputation for cutting through nonsense was legendary. Mr. Morrison, you may cross-examine. Janet stood slowly, carrying a single manila folder. She approached the witness stand with the casual confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. Mrs. Solen, you testified that you've been the primary caregiver for your children throughout their lives. Is that correct? Yes. And you handle their daily routines, coordinate their schedules, manage their care? That's right. I see. Mrs. Solen, can you tell the court where you were on March 15th of this year? Vera blinked, clearly not expecting such a specific question. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact date. Let me help refresh your memory. March 15th was a Tuesday. Your daughter Emma had a science fair presentation that evening. Do you recall where you were? I believe I was at the science fair. Janet opened her folder and pulled out a photograph. Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit A. This is a photo from Emma's science fair, taken by the school photographer. Can you identify the people in this image, Mrs. Solen? Vera studied the photo, and I could see her confidence beginning to waver. That's Emma with her project, and that's my husband. And where are you in this photograph? I must have stepped away momentarily. Actually, according to the school's sign-in records, which we've subpoenaed, you never signed in that evening. But your husband did. At 6:15 p.m. He stayed until 8:30, when the event ended. Eli started to object, but Janet continued smoothly. Mrs. Solen, let me ask you about April 22nd. That was the date of your son Jake's championship soccer game. You testified that you attend his sporting events. Were you there that day? Yes, I believe so. Actually, according to hotel records, which we've also subpoenaed, you were in Boston that weekend, at the Four Seasons. Would you like to explain how you attended your son's soccer game while you were 200 miles away? The courtroom was completely quiet. Vera looked at Eli, who was frantically shuffling through papers, clearly unprepared for this line of questioning. There might be some confusion about the dates. Let me clear up the confusion, Janet said. Mrs. Solen, can you explain why your hotel records show you were out of state 37 times in the past year, while claiming to be home caring for your children? The question hung in the air like a smoke alarm. Vera's perfect composure cracked, her face going pale as she realized the trap she'd walked into. Some of those were business trips. Business trips that don't appear on your company's travel records? Personal travel. Family visits. To Boston, New York, Miami, Chicago. All cities where a Mr. Marcus Hallen, your colleague, happened to be traveling on the exact same dates. Eli shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance? The relevance, Janet said calmly, is that Mrs. Solen has testified under oath that she's been the primary caregiver for her children. But the evidence shows she's been absent from the home 37 times in the past year, often for multiple days, while her husband was home caring for the children. Judge Hawkins leaned forward. I'll allow it. Mrs. Solen, please answer the question. Vera looked trapped, her eyes darting between Eli and the judge. I may have traveled more than I initially remembered. May have? Janet's voice carried just a hint of incredulity. Mrs. Solen, I have here the employment records for Elena Torvin, who served as your family's nanny for 4 years. According to her timesheets, she worked 63 overnight shifts in the past year alone. Can you explain why you needed a nanny for overnight care if you were home with your children? Elena worked when both my husband and I traveled. Actually, according to these records, your husband was home during every single one of those overnight shifts. Elena was covering for your absences, not his. Janet pulled out another document. I also have security footage from your neighbor's surveillance system, which captures your driveway and front entrance. This footage shows your car absent from the home on 39 separate occasions in the past 6 months, often for multiple consecutive nights. During those same periods, the footage shows your husband's vehicle in the driveway, shows him walking the children to the bus stop, shows him grilling dinner in the backyard. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Vera was visibly shaking now, her perfect facade completely shattered. Mrs. Solen, Janet continued relentlessly, you've presented this court with photographs showing your presence at family events while your husband was absent. But isn't it true that those photos represent a tiny fraction of your children's activities? Isn't it true that you specifically attended events when you knew your husband couldn't be there, specifically to create evidence for this custody case? In fact, isn't it true that you coordinated with your attorney to manufacture situations where your husband would be forced to choose between work and family obligations, specifically to document his absence? Eli was on his feet again. Objection. Attorney-client privilege. Your Honor, Janet said, I'm not asking about communications with counsel. I'm asking about Mrs. Solen's deliberate manipulation of family schedules to create false evidence. Judge Hawkins considered for a moment. I'll allow it, but be careful, counselor. Vera was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I just wanted what was best for my children. What was best for your children? Janet's voice was sharp now. Mrs. Solen, isn't it true that you've been having an extramarital affair with Marcus Hallen for the past 8 months? That's not relevant to my ability to parent. Isn't it true that you and Mr. Hallen have discussed plans to relocate to Seattle, where his company is opening a new regional office? Vera's eyes went wide. She clearly hadn't expected that information to surface. Isn't it true that you've been planning to take the children away from their father, their home, their schools, and their community to start a new life with your lover. Objection! Eli was practically shouting now. Sustained, Judge Hawkins said. Ms. Reeves, you're approaching the line. I apologize, Your Honor. No further questions. Vera stumbled down from the witness stand, her perfect performance in ruins. The woman who'd walked into the courtroom, looking like the ideal mother, was now revealed as something else entirely. A manipulator who'd been willing to lie under oath to steal my children. But Janet wasn't finished. Over the next 2 hours, she systematically demolished every piece of Vera's case. Elena Torvin testified about the real patterns of childcare in our home. Mrs. Durning presented her security footage with the precision of a forensics expert. School administrators confirmed attendance records that contradicted Vera's claims. Most damaging of all, Janet presented the financial records showing Vera's secret expenditures: hotels, flights, restaurants, gifts, all funded by money that should have been going toward our children's future. When it was my turn to testify, I felt strangely calm. I talked about bedtime stories and homework help, about soccer practices and science projects, about being present for the small moments that actually matter in a child's life. I presented my own documentation: calendars, receipts, photos, emails, evidence of consistent, daily involvement in my children's lives. Mr. Solen, Eli asked during cross-examination, isn't it true that your work requires significant travel and long hours? Sometimes, but I've always prioritized my children. When there was a conflict between work and family, I chose family. But you did miss some events? Occasionally, but I was present for the vast majority of their activities, and I was home every single night that my wife was traveling. You seem very prepared with documentation, almost like you were building a case. I looked at him steadily. I was protecting my children. Once I realized what was really happening, I started keeping better records. Wouldn't you do the same? The hearing ended with closing arguments that felt like formalities. Janet summarized the evidence methodically, painting a clear picture of who had actually been raising Emma and Jake. Eli did his best to salvage his client's case, but the damage was too extensive. Judge Hawkins retired to her chambers for deliberation. We waited in the hallway, Vera and Eli on one side, Janet and I on the other. Vera looked broken, her perfect facade completely gone. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. When we were called back into the courtroom, Judge Hawkins looked tired but determined. I've reviewed all the evidence presented today, and I've considered the testimony from both parties. This court's primary concern is the best interest of the children involved. She paused, looking directly at Vera. Mrs. Solen, I find your testimony today to be inconsistent with the documentary evidence presented. More troubling, I believe you deliberately misrepresented your role in your children's daily care, while simultaneously mischaracterizing your husband's involvement. Vera was crying again, but quietly now. The evidence clearly shows that Mr. Solen has been the primary caregiver for these children, despite working full-time. He has been present for their daily needs, their school activities, and their emotional support. Meanwhile, Mrs. Solen has been absent from the home for extended periods while pursuing personal interests that she attempted to conceal from this court. Judge Hawkins looked down at her notes. Therefore, this court awards primary physical custody of Emma Solen and Jake Solen to their father, Cole Solen. Mrs. Solen will have supervised visitation every other weekend, pending completion of family counseling and a psychological evaluation. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. It was over. Vera collapsed into Eli's arms, sobbing. I sat perfectly still, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: the absence of fear. My children were safe. They would stay in their home, in their schools, with the parent who had actually been raising them. Outside the courthouse, Janet shook my hand. Good work, Cole. You built a hell of a case. We built a hell of a case. What happens now? I looked back at the courthouse where Vera was probably still trying to process how completely her strategy had backfired. Now I go home to my kids and figure out how to explain why their mother won't be living with us anymore. And Vera? I thought about that for a moment. Vera, who'd tried to steal my children. Vera, who'd lied under oath. Vera, who'd spent months planning my destruction while I'd been making breakfast and helping with homework. Vera gets to live with the consequences of her choices, just like the rest of us. I drove home to tell Emma and Jake that their lives were about to change, but that they were safe, loved, and staying exactly where they belonged. The war was over, and for the first